G'day regulators, we are back, and today I got a bit of a story. Just a couple months ago over Christmas, I was driving the ute around at the beach with my family and that, and one of my cousins was in the back while I was flooring, and he goes, "Do you hear that strange noise coming from underneath the cab?" And I was like, "Nah, not really." And I was probably just pumping the music, turned it up a bit louder as usual, and that's probably why I hadn't noticed it. It might have been a few months, but I really didn't notice nothing. And I was just sussing it out afterwards, and when he noticed this while we were at the beach, I kept driving it as usual. I thought nothing was up. Then I ended up taking like a 2.5 hour drive to Canberra for summer nats, and you know, the other 2.5 hours or 3 hours home from there until I got home and sussed out underneath. And I seen that the center bearing was completely gone, which it was showing some signs of wear. Like 3 years ago, I bought a spare ready for this, and I found out it was completely shot. And I was like, oh well, I've been driving so long with it, and I had to go somewhere else. Went half an hour away, got where I wanted to be, and when I was leaving there to come home, like just yesterday, I floored it, made a worse noise, and it was shuddering and shaking, and I'm like, am I going to be able to make my way home? But sure enough, if I drove it right, it wasn't like vibrating and that, and I got home and I said, this is now like where I've got to sort of do something about it. But anyway, here's what it looks like. I do currently have COVID as well, so I'm just hanging around here hating life. Yeah, this is what's left of it. It's not really supposed to be like this at all whatsoever. And I've also just gotten a new uni because I don't really, you know, it's just that old, and I've thrashed the hell out of it. You know, so I don't want to pull it apart and put the same one back. Yeah, but it, you know, it's done a lot of work, these things, especially with the big tyres and the weight that I've always got on it. But anyway, I might show the process of how to get it out of the car first. Alright, so under here, first of all, I'm pretty sure the automatic ones don't have this at all fitted. But anyway, my ute, it's got this secondary and massive long-range primary tank, holds like 220 litres. When I was making the secondary tank, I made sure that when I fit it up, I'd still be able to get that centre bearing and tail shaft out, and it was actually really easy, so I'd done something right back then. But anyway, basically you just want to chop the front wheels, then jack up the back, and if you don't put a stand under there, I don't think it's so bad, although you should do it. But if the jack failed, the tyre would just go on the ground. Not much would happen. But once you jack up this back tyre and release a handbrake, you can spin it. And mine's a little bit tough because I got a limited slip in it, but basically that'll spin pretty free, and then that would spin this around to give you the access to all 4 of the bolts. And then I just left the bottom one in loose, the last one. Undone these 2 bolts, and then when I got the last one of these 2 out, I just held it up with one hand, removed that one, and sort of just slid it out from here. And turns out you sort of want a drain tray under there. Let's see what I got. Yeah, it didn't get much at all. It's not really worth topping up, even though the capacity in these is pretty small. I think I might be worth topping up. I'll see what happens. I don't think it'll take much. It just takes engine oil anyway. But yeah, now back onto the shaft. Now probably would have been best to do this at the start, but once it's all connected, you would sort of mark a dot there, dot here, and a dot just wherever you're pulling apart, and you could just do it along the whole lot anyway, just so that you put it all back how it was, because you could put it in the other way. And usually this wouldn't really cause many dramas, but if you sort of really care about balance, sometimes it makes a difference. But I'm pretty sure usually, like the way how this has a weight on it and that one has a weight on it, it's so that this piece is weighed properly and this piece is weighed properly, and you can't really get it wrong. But I've sort of just put a mark in it at the moment anyway, so that way, at least between these places, because I'm going to be pulling this spline out, that way I can just line it straight back up with where it belongs, make sure they're dead in line. I probably don't need a mark for that, but then I can't put it in upside down, so it'll probably work out in the end. either that or otherwise when you take the nut off, you just draw a line and make sure it goes back. But all right, and just real quick, the bolts for the flange are 14mm, and the bolts that go through this part of the center bearing are 17. They're the only two that you really need to get it out. And now I'm just getting rid of some of the grease here so I can remove the clips. Definitely want to watch your eyes when these sort of come flying out. Here's what one looks like, although I've sort of bent it up a bit, but it will just be a bit more rounder. And there's just 4 of them. I'll get them all out. Technically, if you wanted to keep that uni, you'd only have to get rid of 2 of them. They would be, yeah, the top and bottom one in this instance. That way you could just keep these 2 attached and get rid of it, but I'm going to get all of them out. Okay, so to remove it now, I'm going to have this part laying on the bench, which will be supporting both sides of the uni through the caps here, and then have this all hanging off, and I'll hit down here, which will push the cap upwards till I can remove it, then flip it upside down and repeat, and then I'll be able to remove this piece. Okay, so now the cap's popped out. You want to be good with the strikes, but don't overdo it, because otherwise you might warp something and create an imbalance and a vibration when you drive. So now you can't pull it out until you get the other side out. Flip it over here and repeat. Remove his cap. There you go. Sort of, it rolls the crossover of the uni, and then it comes out. Okay, so I've got this in the vise now. I've got to try to punch that notch out in the nut so I can remove it. Okay, so I also just came to a realization that as long as I make all the grease nipples face the same direction when I set it back up, they will all line up now that I've marked this spot. And anyway, I've sort of done my best to give it a bit of action over there. So now I've also figured out it to be 27mm. So I'll put this bar on it and see if it just turns in the vise, because I don't think I got it that tight. Yeah, straight away. You don't want to be too forceful with that nut, with that sort of the way it's been caved in. I'm just going easy on it, but I do have a big bar, so I've got to be careful. Okay, so the thread is really good on this, same for the nut. Ideally you would replace the nut so you have some fresh space to punch back in, but I'll find enough somewhere in it. Cleaned all the gunk out of there, and I just removed the main broken part. So now I'm just going to hammer on this bit right here and get it going so I can slip the new one on. Rightio guys, this is the day after. When I beat the old leftovers of the center bearing, I damaged this ring. Seems to be like some kind of dust cap seal, because the way how this is with this, when this goes over it, it kind of like stops grease and stuff from getting into it. And I damaged it, and I was trying to source a new one, and the only way I could is probably from a wrecker, or if I sort of dug deeper. But I spoke to a driveline guru to see if he could get me one. He says if he ever has to do something like this, he rips them out anyway. So I don't really know what to take from that, because he sounded like a bit of a pro, and I am going to follow up on it anyway and see what happens. I feel like I might prematurely play up, because like this is just going to be open. But technically with the dust cap, stuff will find its way in there pretty easily anyway, but the dust cap would stop a fair bit anyway, so he's probably kind of right. He just said to kind of fill it up with grease, so I will do that, but I've only got to worry about the underside, and I'll just do that afterwards, because of course it's still, there's one on the yoke as well, and it's still alright, which will be on the top. But for now I've just got to punch it on, so I'm just going to spline the yoke in and just evenly tap it around till it sinks. And I've kind of made sure that this cap doesn't actually hit onto the rubber. It is the steel part of the yoke hitting onto the steel part of this bearing, and I'm just going to press it on. I dropped a little copper ring that was in there at the start too. Drop that in there and punch it down the rest of the way. Now I'll just line this yoke and put it back on the way how it came off, which I've got my scratch marks. I'm going to really crank down that 27mm nut. Nuts moved further on to how it was, and it's definitely tight enough. And now I just got to put it in. I'll just use a punch and hammer the notch back in, because I'm not replacing the nut, and it does line up to where it needs to be. Okay, so I think I'm going to carry the rest of this job out on the floor. So here we've just got our clips and the grease nipple, and here's the uni. First things first, just find out where the grease nipple is going to go. It's going to go onto this one, which means that we want it facing up, but you can put the caps wherever you like anyway. But I'm going to remove the two that I'm going to be fitting first, and you do sort of want to just make sure all these holes where they're fitting into are sort of cleaned out, so that's good. Now this is the part, well, you could still swap the caps if you get it wrong, but I'm going to put it in the way how it's going to go. So you just got to fit it in like this. And once I get the first cap in a little bit, I slide the uni into it. And now when you tap, you just got to be careful. You don't want to have this all the way over that way when you tap. I hold it out just a little bit. If you don't do anything about it, there's all the little needles inside of here, but you'd be doing a pretty good job to lose them, because they're sort of tacked in with the grease. It's probably worse on the trucks, because the trucks, they're sort of heavier. I'm just giving this very light taps. I almost could use this ball end, just very softly. Now it's in enough to where I can fit a clip. So you just want to make sure it goes all the way in. Yep, that's home. So now I can put this one in, make sure the T's hard up that way. You just sort of want to make sure that it can slide up in there, because otherwise, if the T sort of is a bit cross-eyed, you don't want to be hammering this into it. You want to make sure that it's going where it's supposed to be. Try the clip. All right, that's home as well. And see right now, it's very stiff. It's all bindy. You don't really want that. Usually what I find is if you tap this part of it, you might have to play around with it. But you do that. Or sometimes you sort of like hammer the top there, or you hammer it away, one of the two. You do a mixture, and that's feeling alright. But if I play around with it, I can get it a little bit better, and that's how you sort of have no load on it, and it'll break in real smooth. If it does have a little bit of load on it, it probably won't be so bad. It'll probably sort itself out. I do know that if you get it right, you definitely won't have any problems. Yeah, that's so much better than how I was at the start. I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so now with this one, I just make sure that all the other two grease nipples are facing up on both ends of the shaft. So now I know this is the one where I want it up, and that's going to make sure that both of these shafts are the same way they came out. So clean these out first. Definitely don't want to contaminate inside these caps. That'd be the worst thing. Getting some grit inside of there. Okay. Remove both. Now this is the important part, to make sure I put the right cap in the right place. So I tilt this one forward. Drop that in. Okay, that's cool. Grease nipple one there. Okay, so that's started. I think I'm going to start the other one. Okay, so when I put this clip in here, I'll make it a lot easier for myself by just opening it up. Bang, that's in, and I have pushed that in too far, which doesn't matter, just makes it easy to fit. And now I just gotta return it back by hammering this one in. Still gotta go. Okay, I'll try to get it in. There we go. Okay, so they're all in now. Now I just clean up where I was hammering, where the grease nipple belongs. Clean my hands a bit. And I'm just got to find the appropriate size for this little grease nipple. So I'll do that before I throw it in. 7mm. That's it. Awesome. So you've got all the grease nipples lining up. You'd have to be doing something good to be able to bind this up, but you make sure it's not. And then I've just got to double check that there's not too much bind in the set of caps that I've just sort of put on. So roll it this way. So that way seems free. They both feel very free, so I'm going to roll with it. So next thing we do is fit it up, and last thing we do is grease it. And before we go to put it in, just make sure that we clean this shaft where it seals going into the gearbox. We'll be over there to fit it up now. I'll just get one of the center bearing bolts ready. Just sort of hoist this in. It's in the gearbox. Alright, that's one of them started, one of the center bearing bolts. Now I just get the other one. And I think before I tighten these, I'd rather get the flange, because this sort of has some movement, whereas when I bolt that in, it's going to go where it wants to go. Yeah, so I'll set that one up. So my ute's a lot tighter than anyone else's because I've got these dual tanks down here. It makes it a bit tight, but when I made these, well, I bolted in this one was a bolt-in, no, this one is a long-range replacement, and I made this secondary one, and I just had to make it so that I can be able to remove this tail shaft. Luckily, I did a couple things right, because it did come out pretty easily and go back in. Marks on the pinion line up on the flange. Alright, and then after this I've just got to tighten 2 more. Yeah, they're definitely tight enough. Yeah, I just got to tighten up the two center bearing bolts and give it a grease. So to grease these is very simple. Just sort of want to give it to it till you hear it sort of crackle out of the seals, and just give it a bit more. Some gurus reckon that you can just pump the hell out of them, and then they sort of just clean it up afterwards. It's not really necessary, but you kind of can give it a flush, but yeah, it really doesn't need it. But I'll get the other 2 grease nipples, especially the new one. You can kind of do that a little bit, over grease it and clean it up, but other than that, it's good to go. Okay, so all I've got here is the jack and the wheel chocks over there. Okay, so now what you're going to want to do is you just take it out for a little drive and warm it up, and just get everything all sort of where it wants to be temperature wise and stuff. And then I'm just sort of going to let it go in first gear. Now we're rolling, and then just flatten it. Second gear, flatten it. Just give it a mad pull. First and second gear are the most important. They're the ones where you really sort of test out your work. I sort of did another pull where like I rode the clutch a bit with the high RPM, like sort of just to give it a real tough launch. You know, that's how you know if it can handle that, it's going to handle anything. And it's really smooth, especially because of how bad it used to be in this ute, you know, but yeah, it turned out really well. Yeah, just drop it off at home now. Well, there you go, folks. It really is as simple as that. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.